Thank you very much, and thank you for the great introduction. I'm actually very honored to be here this morning. And when I met Peter in New York last week at the side event of the UN General Assembly, and he told me that, look, if you're in Nairobi, can you please come and talk to us? And we are really thinking of how we should return to Africa with the big Kenyan diaspora that we have in the US and all over the world, and what can we do differently? And so we are hosting this two-day event, and he said to me, it'll be an honor if you can speak to us. So I actually live in Nakuru, and I just drove down for this very, very important event. And I think it's time that we start thinking differently as a continent. It's time that we start doing things differently as a continent. And it's time that we start this whole process of what next for the continent of Africa. As you all know, probably, by 2050, 1 in 4 people on this planet Earth, will be African. And that is a serious opportunity. As you all probably know, that we are the youngest continent on the planet. Our maiden age is 19, and we don't have the problems like what Europe has, or US has, or Japan has, of an aging population. China has also an aging population. They have their one-child policy where they feel that they don't have enough people to work for them. And they also, the only continent or the only country that's close to us is South America and India. India's got a youthful population, but they don't have a young population. But we as a continent of Africa, we have a young population. And with that young population comes new opportunities. And with a young population, we can see that we can actually nurture this productive asset that we have. And one of the most productive assets that we have is our youth, is our human capital, is our human resource. And you can see how many people are working abroad. I mean, if you go to Qatar, or you go to Dubai, if you go to Germany, you go to other countries in the world, we are seeing a huge diaspora community in the US, one of the biggest. And our single largest exports today, as I call it export, is the diaspora income. Last year, the diaspora income was more than $4 billion, to be exact, $4.4 billion. It was 3 times the export value of tea. Tea is our number 1 commodity, which is $1.4 billion. So you can imagine the diaspora money, return money coming back to Kenya for development is $4.4 billion. A serious opportunity for us to see how can we nurture that income that's coming back to us. How can we start adding value on what we are doing? How can we change the narrative of Africa? And if I give you a very simple example of the tea value chain, where as a country, we're only exporting majani chai, and we're getting a $1.4 billion revenue, and we're chest thumping that we have a lot of income here. It's our number 1 export. But if we had done simple value-added teas, that number can grow to $7 billion. And I'll give you an example. Sri Lanka, that exports 400 million kilos of tea, their export revenue is $3.5 billion. Kenya, we export $500 million of tea. That's the tea that we grow. We grow 100 million kilos extra than Sri Lanka does, and our export revenue is $1.4 billion. So it just shows you the disconnect. The only difference is what Sri Lanka is doing, and they add more value on their tea, and they get more value coming back. And if we can do that on tea value addition, we're looking at almost a $7 billion revenue. So you can imagine your needle moves from 1.4 billion to 7 billion. It's just a metamorphic game changer for Kenya. And if you look at the English breakfast tea that all of us very proudly drink, there's nothing English about it. There's not even one bush in England of tea. But what is the recipe of English breakfast tea? And the recipe of English breakfast tea is simple. It is 1 kilo Assam, which is India. It's 1 kilo Ceylon, which is Sri Lanka. And it is 1 kilo Kericho, which is Kenya. So I asked the guys, why is it that we are in the room? And I was told the most important component of that tea is Kenya. And I said, but I don't understand. Why are you saying that? He said, well, let's rewind this whole thing by over 100 years, and you'll realize that all those 3 countries were being ruled by the British, and it was called the British Raj. And British Raj meant that they could blend these different teas from their own tea restriction or empire, as I would call it, the British Empire. And they created a blend called English breakfast tea. I realized very quickly that the most important person in the room is Kenya, and I said to the owners of the brands, it's like big companies like Lipton and Unilever and all those guys who make this tea, Earl Grey and all that. And they said to me, is the Kenyan component provides aroma and color. And tea cannot be sold by aroma and color. When you drink a cup of tea, you smell the tea, if it's got the right aroma. And the most important person in the room is Kenya, in that case, if aroma and color is what you drink tea for. So the point I'm making is, we're the most important person in the room, and we have the least income in the room, because we don't generate the income that that tea is sold at. And it's time we change that narrative. It's time we started branding Kenya. It's time we start branding our own tea. It's time we start doing things differently. And yes, we are talking about the unicorns. It's not so difficult to create a bigger unicorns. I mean, look at Safaricom. It is a unicorn. It started in Kenya. It started with very simple money transfers. And I remember, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, every Friday there was a mad rush, people going home to give their grandmothers some money. And that was a need. And that need created a necessity. And necessity is the mother of invention. And you realize that mother of invention was, how can I transfer money from my phone? It's a Kenyan invention. So if we have a technological savvy youth, how much more can we do? So there's a real game changer in front of us. We have the world's biggest market at our doorstep. We have the Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is a reality. We're looking at 1.5 billion Africans on the continent of Africa. We're looking at a combined GDP of $3.5 trillion. And we're looking at the world's biggest economic trade bloc with 54 countries and a huge landmass. Imagine that as a duty-free market access for you. And how much more can you do? Imagine the duty-free market access you already have with Europe. We signed the EPA, the Economic Partnership Agreement with Europe last year in December. We have an indefinite market access to 600 million Europeans. We have a market access to the US, which expires in 1 year, but we are now negotiating for an extension to 2041, AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, where we are the largest exporters as Kenya for apparel. Almost $440 million of apparel was sold last year to the US alone. And now if you go to the US, and I know a lot of people here from the States, you can see that in the supermarkets, you start seeing the brand made in Kenya. If you go and buy Calvin Klein underwear in Macy's in America, 1 in 10 packets might be made in Kenya. You'll be shocked. But yes, we are chest thumping. We are the biggest in the continent of Africa, and we are the largest exporter. But I was telling His Excellency the President, that it's shame on us that we are doing 0.5% of US imports. The US imports $100 billion of garments. And we are only doing, say, $500 million, and we are feeling happy about it just because we're, and I like what President Museveni says all the time. He said the problem with Africa and the problem with Africans is we are all pygmies, and we are competing who's a taller pygmy. We need to change that narrative. We need to think big. We need to act big. We need to do big. And for all that, we have huge opportunity. We've seen in 2005, we made a mistake in Arusha, in the African Union Ministerial, where African Union ministers went to Hong Kong in 2005, and it's a true story, to a WTO meeting, and they said to that meeting that we are proposing, the only proposal Africa has is that all LDC countries, least developed countries of the world, should be given duty-free market access, duty-free and quota-free market access to the developed world. The Europeans asked the African ministers, are you sure you want this duty-free market access for all LDC countries? And they said, yeah, all LDC countries. So Europe gave them that. I found out in the middle of the night that the negotiations have gone in that direction, and I called our Minister of Industry at that time, Mukisa Kitui. I told him, Minister, what the hell are you doing? He said, what do you mean? This is an African Union position. I said, but what is the Kenya position? Do you know you're putting a pen to all the little jobs that we have in this industry because the LDC is not Africa alone. LDC is also Asia. LDC is also South America. So if today Bangladesh is one of the biggest exporters of apparel in the world from 2005, $42 billion. Their industry was $4 billion in 2005. Last year their export was $42 billion of garments exports, 70% of which goes to Europe because Europe gave them that market access that the Africans asked for. I stopped the Americans giving that market access, so their exports to America are not very large, it's $4 or $5 billion. But my point here is that if we are duty-free to the world's biggest market, $100 billion market, why are we not doing $2 billion? That is going to create 200,000 jobs. Why are we not doing $5 billion? It's still 5% of the US market. That will create 500,000 jobs. So we need to start thinking different. We need to start thinking value chains. We need to start thinking market access. And we need to start asking ourselves, size of pie, slice of pie. Once you know the size of the pie in the US in one value chain is 100 billion, your simple question should be, what percentage of that pie do you want? And once you know the size and size, that means the what is clear. And when the what is clear, the how to is a very easy discussion. And that's what we need to be doing. So I can talk forever and talk about different value chains and tell you there are serious opportunities for us in Kenya. And we have a youth that is our greatest asset. We have a diaspora community that wants to grow with us. We have our greatest brand ambassadors who are our runners. And wherever you go in the world, you will obviously, your runner, you will win the race, your marathons and your 1,500 meters or 3,000. It's just known. Everybody knows if a Kenyan is in that race, he's probably going to win. And if he's going to win, and if we can win in running, why can't we win in everything else? We have the energy, we have the zeal, we have the passion, we have the enthusiasm. So I think I just want to stop there, and I want to open this up for the next 2 days. I want us to think differently. I want us to do differently. I want us to look at the world as our oyster, because the government has given us duty-free market access primarily to Europe, US, Africa, EAC, COMESA. We have all these opportunities ahead of us, but what are we doing about those opportunities? How are we turning those market access into real business? How are we creating real jobs? How are we creating social peace? I mean, a few months ago, what you saw with the Gen Zs was a very simple, as far as I'm concerned, it was a very simple ask. They're only asking for jobs. We have a youth that's coming out. We have a university pools who is looking for good jobs. And that's the only ask, and that's not a difficult ask as far as I'm concerned. But as an ecosystem, what we need to do, whichever way you look at it, you can make it political if you want. But bottom line, it was a social economic problem that we have in our country. We have a very high unemployment. More than 40% of the population is unemployed. We have 1 million people that come out of our universities. We don't have 1 million jobs. So what do you expect them to do? So we have a collective social responsibility to create social peace. And that social peace will only come with good paying jobs. And good paying jobs will only come when the industry, the ecosystem, the business, everything starts expanding, and we start thinking beyond our borders. And yes, there's a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of opportunity back home, but how can we map the two? How can we marry the two? How can we do things differently? And how can we create those jobs which our youth are so much looking forward to? So I'll stop there, and I'm open for any questions, but thank you very much for listening to me. And I just wanted to set the tone, a very positive tone that, it's only a beginning of a journey. And yes, YORA is a great thing that they're looking forward for us to taking this to the next level. Asanteni sana, and God bless you. Thank you. I'm just reminded that I'm honored and have the great pleasure to declare this summit officially open, and I'm sure there's a lot of deliberations in the next 2 days that you will do that will turn these contacts into contracts. Thank you very much.